A few weeks back, I met a woman when I was at a convention, a grandmother, and she shared a pretty amazing story with me, so I wanted to share it with you guys today. She told me about her son and her daughter-in-law and how they had just adopted a little boy from Haiti. And I thought, man, that is incredible, you know. And you can see the joy and how excited she is about this new grandson of hers. She's showing me pictures of him, and I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm like, man, it's easy to see how his parents fell madly in love with him. I mean, he's just a beautiful little boy. But the part of this story that is fascinating and kind of sets it apart, because adoption is wonderful. I mean, an adoption is a beautiful depiction of what God has done for us. But the thing about this story was the condition of this little boy that they adopted. See, when he was a baby, they said that he suffered from a high fever. And as a result of that high fever not being treated, he has severe cerebral palsy. And this family fell in love with him, and they adopted him. And I have a little brother that has cerebral palsy, so I couldn't help but think, man, this family, they adopted this little boy, and there are so many different trials that they're going to go through as a family. So many doctor's appointments and medical things. There's so many things that they are going to have to endure together because they adopted this little boy. I mean, this family, they may not ever get to experience with their son what it's like to watch him go out and throw a baseball around. They may never get to experience him say, "I love you." They may never get to watch him go out on his first date. All the simple things that can make parenting such a joy and so wonderful. All those things they may never get to experience. But they love this little boy. All those things are overshadowed by the love that they have for him. This couple adopted their son with the understanding that their lives, if they bring this little boy into their lives have to change drastically. They have to sacrifice so many of the things that they want to do in order to properly take care of him. But when they look at their little boy, they don't see all of the mess. They don't see all of the doctor's visits. They don't see all of the seizures, all the sleepless nights. When they look into his eyes, they are overcome with a selfless love. It's not a passive love. It's not a leftover love. It's not a conditional love. This love is a self-sacrificing, reach down into the dirt and pull a little boy up so that he can have new life kind of love. Does that love sound familiar to any of you here? As Christians, does that love sound familiar to you? Because it should. Because we serve a God that is love. We serve a God who demonstrates perfect love. Throughout the Scriptures, we see that God is love and He dwells within His people. So if a God of love dwells within His people, what ought to also dwell within His people? His love. We'll be reading through 1 John 4, 7 through 21. And in this passage, John reminds us of an undeniable fact about those who follow Christ and the result of having the Spirit of God living within them. God's love makes lovers. God's love makes lovers. We cannot claim to be a part of this God of perfect love without being drastically transformed into lovers of God and lovers of His children. We'll see today where love finds its origin. We'll see today the ultimate expression of love. And today we will see how that love must completely reshape and restructure how you and I follow Jesus Christ. This is the third time that John has spoken on love in this book. So I think that this is something that he is stressing over and over again because it's something that we cannot miss. Look with me at 1 John 4, and we'll start with verses 7 and 8. It says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God." Why? Because God is love. Here we find the origin of love. God is love, and love comes from God. Love is one of His many attributes. He cannot be any less. He cannot be any more love. He is just love. Just like you and I cannot be any more human. We cannot be any less human. We just are. So He just is. Throughout the Scriptures, God demonstrates the kind of love He is, and that is selfless love. He is love that gives without any motivation other than to love. He loves with no need for return. So when John says that everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God, that is the kind of selfless love that he is talking about. It's not a love as we might define it. It's not a love as so much of the world defines it. I actually looked to see what the world defines as love. I looked in a Webster dictionary. Merriam-Webster defines love as a feeling of strong or constant affection for a person, or a warm attachment, or even enthusiasm. Well, these definitions of love, they can seem good. They're not God's definition of love. God's love is not a feeling. It is not an emotion or an attachment. God's love is action. God's love is seeing a need and meeting that need no matter what the cost. And God's love is dying to self and living for others. So with this in mind, John says that if you love like this, if you love with this kind of love, then rest assured, you are born of God and you know Him. You can be sure you know Him if you love one another, because God's love makes lovers. It makes lovers. John is asking, are you a lover? Are you a lover as God defines it? How can we be sure that God's love is really different from this world's? How can we be confident that God's love is not all about emotion, it's not all about feelings, enthusiasm, but rather a selfless, meeting the needs, self-sacrificing kind of love? How can we be sure that this is the kind of love that God demonstrates? John tells us the kind of love God has in verses 9 through 10. He says, "In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent His only Son into the world so that we might live through Him. In this is love. Not that we have loved God, but that He loved us and sent His Son to be the propitiation for our sins." I know that we read verses like this and we tend to skim over them because we know them, but we need to realize what is being said here. This is how God demonstrates His love. It's the most profound message that has ever been on human ears. It is the good news, the message of the gospel. Think about this. God demonstrated His supernatural, perfect love by even creating us. But because we do not reciprocate God's selfless love, but rather our own self-centered love, our own self-gratifying love, we chose to serve ourselves rather than God. It is important to note that God does not love us because we love Him. He has always initiated the love. He has always loved us first. If we are honest with ourselves, God is the only thing that has ever lived that deserves love. But what is our response? So often we hate Him. If we're honest with ourselves and we're honest about our own sin, we know without a doubt that God should hate us. Our own sin, our own depravity, we deserve to be hated by God. But He loves us instead. Have you ever tried to love someone that hated you? Have you ever tried to love someone who wanted nothing to do with you? God doesn't deserve our hate. He only deserves our love and obedience. Luckily for us, God is not hate. God is love. He sent Jesus to be a man so that we might have life in Him. John says this is love. We hated Him, and He still sent Jesus to suffer and die on a cross so that He could punish our sin on His Son. Just take a step back with me for a minute. I want us to try to understand the kind of love that was shown to us through Jesus. I know we hear about this often, but let's try to understand truly the love that was expressed to us through Jesus. Before we even get to the cross, before we even get there, ponder what John said concerning Jesus. He said, Jesus came into this world. Jesus came into this world. That right there is so remarkable. Before we even get to the cross, try to understand that Jesus came down from His throne, seated above everything in existence. He could exercise His power and authority over everything. But He gave that up to become a helpless baby born in a dirty barn. He was the King of Kings, and He came to this earth to be a homeless man. We must understand that love, as God defines it, may cost you everything for the rest of your life on this earth. Love, as God defines it, may require you to give up your comforts and your pleasures in order to properly love the way that God calls us to love. Like the adoptive parents in my introduction, would you be willing to completely alter the plans that you have for your life in order to love on someone else like that? When Jesus says that there is no greater expression of love than to lay your life down for another, what comes to your mind? I think we tend to glamorize and think verses like this to be poetic. Oh, I love someone so much that I would die for them. But is that what Jesus is saying? He says to love someone so much that you would lay your life down for them. Loving in this manner may not require that you die for someone. Loving in this manner may require that you live for someone. Dying can be made glamorous because it is usually quick and then the pain can be gone for you. But living and laying your life down for another, as Jesus demonstrated, it is hard, messy, and at times back-breaking, strenuous work. Are we willing to love and demonstrate that love the way that Jesus has loved and demonstrated that love to us? All of this, and we haven't even come to the expression of God's love as He had demonstrated it to us on that cross. Jesus died. This King, this Creator, this Commander, this Ruler, our God died for you. He died. That should blow our minds. Trying to understand the kind of love that God has for us. Francis Chan, I heard him put it like this in a similar light. If you have kids, I want you to picture your kids. If you don't have kids, just think of the person that means very much to you. If you're thinking of that person, you're thinking of your kids. Think of them nailed to a cross. Think of them crying out to you in pain and agony. And imagine you have the power to make it stop at any time. But you don't. Because if you do, those very same people who nailed Him to the cross, those very same people who hate Him and you, they would die instead. This is what happened when Jesus was tortured and crucified for our hatred of Him and the Father. God loves you so much that He allowed His Son to die right in front of His eyes so that you could have life. This is why we can confidently say that God is love. And not only is He love, but He demonstrates perfect love. So what is the proper response to God's love? And if it was our hate that placed Him on that cross in the first place, how can we ever hope to respond to Him correctly now? Look with me at verses 11 through 16. It says, "Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and His love is perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in Him and He in us, because He has given us His Spirit. And we have seen and testify that the Father has sent His Son to be the Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in Him and He in God. So we have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him." We see right away in verse 11 what a proper response to God's love is. It's almost like John is pleading with us in light of all the things that he just said about Jesus. Guys, look what God has done for you. Look what He has done for you. Look at the love that God has for you. And in light of that love, love one another. It almost doesn't have to be said. It's just, on a certain level, common sense. In light of that love, love one another. God's love makes lovers. So how could we not be moved by God's love to love one another? It doesn't make sense. We have to see how unreasonable it is to say that we have God's love without it being obvious to those around us that we're supposed to be loving on. Next, take note of the progression in these passages. It's not by accident that John structures what he says in this order. We'll see in this passage the marks of a believer. A believer first confesses that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And then a believer knows and believes the love that God has for them. And a believer abides in love. All of these things a believer does. But what happens before the believer confessed, before he believed, before he could abide in love? Verse 13, by this we know that we abide in Him and He in us. We know that we are true believers. Why? Because He has given us His Spirit. Key element in this passage. Only God's love can transform us into lovers, because only His Spirit inside of us can cause us to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Only His Spirit inside of us can cause us to believe in the love God has for us. And only His Spirit inside of us can cause us to abide in selfless, active, real love. Having this spirit of love inside of us and believing the love that God has for us has to drastically change the way that we approach and view God. It has to. God's love not only makes lovers, but God's love makes confident lovers. Are you a confident lover of God and His children? Do you have confidence as you walk with Christ? Verse 17 and 18 says, by this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment. Because as He is, so also are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. It's interesting. Our confidence is a sign that our love for God is being perfected. I thought to myself, I wonder how many Christians have a view of God as some kind of powerful being that's holding a rule book, and He's just examining us by that rule book, eagerly waiting for us to screw up so that He can punish us. I wouldn't tell you that that's my view of God. It's not. But some of the things that I do and some of the ways that I respond to God, in a very real sense, they would say that. If this is our view of God, and if we're trying to do good things because we are afraid that He might strike us down if we don't, then we don't really know God. And we don't really understand His love. If we truly know God and we truly believe in His love, then we cannot see Him as a tyrant God that is just eagerly waiting for us to mess up so that He can punish us. It's not the God of the Bible. And if you're ever tempted to feel this way, just look at Jesus. Look at how He lived for you. Look at how He died for you. Look at that expression of love that God has for you as demonstrated through the life of His Son. Sometimes I think Christians, we think that we're too messed up for God's love. But when we think that we are too messed up for His love, we have to realize that we completely downplay what He did for us on that cross. Christian, do you think that your sin is more powerful than God's love? John is reminding Christ followers to be confident in the gift of salvation that has been given to us by a God that loves us so much that He was willing to die. Salvation is not dependent upon us, thank God, but rather it is dependent upon the sufficiency of the blood of Christ. So if you lack confidence, it is not that you lack confidence in yourself, but rather you lack confidence in the power of the blood of Christ. That is why there is no room for fear and love to dwell with inside a Christian. The two are like water and oil. It says that fear can only get in the way of God's love. That is why God's perfect love has to cast out fear. Do not let fear hold you back from all that God is intending for you to do. Throughout the book of 1 John, we have seen that God's love is something that He has always shown us first. His love is an active, real, get your hands dirty kind of love. So it only makes sense that God's love makes lovers who respond to His love with active, real expressions of love. Verse 19 through 21. We love because He first loved us. If anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from Him. Whoever loves God must also love his brother. They go hand in hand. Verse 19 again reveals the difference between salvation by grace through faith and salvation by works. I don't want us to miss that. We love God because He first loved us. It's not because we love God, He now will love us in return. We love God because it is the only appropriate response to His love for us, because God's love makes lovers. So the question then has to be, if God's love makes lovers, are you a lover? Are you a lover? Are you a lover of God and a lover of His children? And remember, we are talking about righteous, selfless, servanthood love. Not emotions or feelings, not pretty or eloquent words. The love we have for God is demonstrated through the practical application of that love expressed to our brothers and sisters. Let me say that again. The love that we have for God is demonstrated through the practical application of that love expressed to our brothers and sisters. Is the love you have for others and God demonstrated clearly by the sacrifices that you make for them? Do we love on our community? Do we love our coworkers? Do we love our friends? Do we love our family? Do we love our enemies? What is the way that you love those around you? What is that saying about how you feel towards God? Scripture is clear. We cannot pretend to love God if we do not love His people with selfless, self-sacrificing, real love. Do not deceive yourself. This love is an active love that we're talking about here. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not live in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. Don't just say it, act on it. It's 1 John 3. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you. And from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. Luke 6. Loving the way God calls us to love can seem impossible. To express love in this manner can be daunting. Let's be honest, it can seem impossible. If you find it extremely hard to love on people, if you find it extremely hard to love on strangers, extremely hard to love on people that you don't really even care for, just remember remember the real reason why we do it. Jesus said in Matthew 25, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord," let me back up. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." No matter how uncomfortable or how unpleasant or how much we have to sacrifice and give up, we need to ultimately love on others around us because it truly is our expression of love to God and it is pleasing to Him. The truth of love is clear. Love originated with God because God is love. And having His love means placing others before our own wants, our own needs, even our own rights. It is a love that causes us to lay our lives down for others. Not just being willing to die, but being willing to live and lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. It is a love that is willing to sacrifice. A love that is willing to lose everything in this life. Everything in this life, if that is what is necessary. The product of God's love is clear. God's love makes lovers that are confident, because the love of God dwells inside of us. And God's love makes lovers that are fearless, because that love of God that's inside of us is casting out that fear. And God's love makes lovers that are real. It makes lovers that are tangible, because that is the way that we express true love back to God. God's love makes lovers. Are you a lover?